plant list for site plans, which is is the goes along with the site plan ordinance, which is eventually probably going to be updated. So working with folks in planning to get some clarity. Different people want different things for that list, and then rep wants to incorporate it into the database. So that would make the database not a native plant database, because it's not going to be exclusively natives on that particular list at this time. So there's a lot of pieces to sort of figure out, but I think I have the list mostly done in terms of what will be on it and all the invasives that were removed, and with a lot of your feedback that I've kept or helped guide the process. So it's better than it was, but it's not finished yet because there's still a discussion going on about what specific categories and how the list should be and whether it should be part of the database and things like that.
Well, I might have a solution for that about whether it should be part of the database or not. I have to give a DBA answer to that, which is that data of something not being true is still data, right? So even though you have a native plant database, if you have you can still contain a species in your database that's not native, that's flagged as, we know this is not native. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thought that's the thought that I had, was that it just, if folks are willing to change the name of it and just have it be called something like the Albemarle County Plant Database, and then when you go in, you can select, I want the Piedmont Native Plants database, or I want the site plan database list, and then you can kind of query out what subset of plants you want.
Yeah, so you're getting really close to something that I've been talking about for a long time anyway, which is separating out the presentation layer, the thing that everyone interacts with the actual data. So that once you separate those two pieces, you break that link and make the data its own thing and the presentation layer its own thing, then you can use the data for multiple purposes. So for example, the data could be used for the site plan, as you said, the site plan presentation, right? So someone could say, well, show me the site plan list of species, and we could do that from the same data. Or you could take the same data and show the native plant database. Now people looking at the website will think, I'm just interacting with the native plant database, and they will know nothing about those other entries. But it'll still be there, and the data can be shared between the two.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm already, I know you know a lot more about the programming side of it, but yeah, if it could be one database and have just multiple ways to access it, so you could come in maybe if you came in through community development, through that way to get to like where the developers or the planners who are looking for the site plan database could get to accessing that same information that's stored, but it's pulled out in a different way. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but
yeah, you're explaining it fine. The best way I can explain it is, you've probably gone to weather.gov, right? And you can go in there and you can put your zip code in, or you can put in like Crozet, Virginia, and get weather for Crozet, or Charlottesville, Virginia, and get weather for Charlottesville. Well, that's the presentation layer. That's the thing you interact with. But I can get the same data from weather.gov as a web service. So I can actually retrieve the data directly without going through a website at all. And then I could build my own website that has like a little thing that shows the weather on the corner of the screen, that's customized just for my website. Mm-hmm. The beautiful thing is that it doesn't even necessarily have to be one, as long as you're doing something like a web service where there's a standardized format to the data. It could be two databases, and you can still merge the data into one data set to use it for some purpose. It's like you could have a site plan database, a native plant database, but as long as they have a common key, like, we use the USDA symbol to relate things together, then you can still like pull it into one space. And the people looking at it won't know the difference.
Right.
But I guess the takeaway from all that is really, yes, absolutely. I mean, if something's in a site plan database, that's important information that we'd probably want to know about, and be able to know about it in conjunction with all the other information we know about the native plants.
So, Lonnie, can I interrupt you
And
for a
from a
moment?
technological standpoint,
Lonnie, do we have an agenda for, I mean, it seems like when I came in 5-6 minutes ago, you were already in a conversation. So did I miss the agenda somehow?
yeah, we haven't started an agenda. I started waiting for everyone to be here. So we're all here. So yeah, so let's go ahead and begin. First, it'd be nice. I know, sorry, I missed the last Natural Heritage Committee meeting. I heard that Liz was there, and there was discussion about one of her policy items that we had presented about Sugar Hollow. If anyone wanted to say a word or two about that, and if we're happy with where that's went.
Who was it? No, one of the supervisors was there. Was it Liz?
It was Liz Palmer.
Yeah, it was Liz Palmer. And so she talked about that basically they're looking at all of that, but they wanted that letter from us, that for us to talk to them first was exactly the right thing to do. And they wanted that, although they like what we say, and that's the lines they're tending to go on, it would be helpful to have that letter from us. And Christine was going to do that. I didn't actually see the letter, although it may be in our Google Docs, and I'm not sure. So that's my memory. Maybe Kate, you remember something different?
No, I think that's along the same lines. Liz did say that communicating out to the other groups, Ravenna and the city would certainly be fine with them, just to have support. What I've learned since in public meeting is that the entities are working together just on agreements. So there's nothing in stone. They're just trying to figure out how to work together. I do know that the bladder in that dam has to be replaced. So I think there's a lot of equipment currently being stored. Is that right, Lonnie? Have you seen that?
I haven't been down there in
Okay, not
recent
yet.
months. There's a big sign that says something about like a lot of traffic.
Okay.
But I
My
haven't been
understanding
down
is that they're going to replace the bladder, and then it is hoped, or that, if agreements can be reached, that they'll be ready to act when that work is done. So hopefully that'll go along, but to have agreements ready to happen, but that's what they've been working on.
Okay.
So
Kim,
the
do we know
evening news said that the bladder, it will take until next fall 2021, to have that work done. They have to lower the dam by 12 feet and do the work and all. So
It's a lot of work.
Right, that's a lot of work, but it would be nice if in the meantime we can think about what we want to have start immediately when they're done.
Yeah, agreed.
So Kim, does anyone know if the letter was actually sent to the Board of Supervisors yet?
Yes,
Oh, it was. Okay.
Liz did say, I thought Liz said that she read it.
Oh, okay. All right, that's good.
Mhm.
All right, well, it's good that that's in the works. I did follow up on one of the items. At least we know that there's a large property that's for sale of 110 acres. And it turns out that PEC was was the organization that worked on the easement for that property. And since the family just spent a lot of time rewriting that easement, it's probably unlikely that we'll be able to get anything else out of that. It would have been nice to get something like we talked about other access points for fishing or passive recreation. it would have been nice to have gotten something in those 110 acres, but it's, although the family still hasn't been approached, I think the general consensus is it's probably not likely for that property.
Why is that the consensus? Based on what?
I think just because because the family spent a lot of time with the lawyers already, like just recently. And so going through another process of getting some kind of easement on the property, or might be, something they don't want to do. I don't know.
Is this someone anybody knows that we could get I mean, I'd love to read the easement document, because honestly, many of those are boilerplate. Some of them are very easy to modify. Modifying text in a document doesn't take a whole lot of lawyer time.
It's Peggy Gilgus.
Oh,
is-
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's her family. And
Yeah.
Peggy was, and I believe Peggy was a past committee member.
Yeah, I mean, I know Peggy. I know you know Peggy.
Yeah.
Well, her parents' home, Puppy Run, that was 600, that's 600 acres. And that I was a volunteer for Virginia Outdoors Foundation, and their property was one that I monitored and went over. So this must be a different piece of property.
Yeah, there's two pieces. There's one by First Bridge, and then there's the one that's further down, closer to the Girl Scout camp. And so yeah, I think there's more than, but and it would be nice to it'd be nice to know about both pieces if there's some opportunity there. I know that the Monticello Bird Club and other organizations have been invited by their parents for a long time to go hike the trails or go on outings and things there. It would be, I know I was invited to walk on their trails before. It would be nice if we could get something like an actual trail easement or something like that.
Well, Christine has a relationship with Peggy because the two of them are making a presentation to the master naturalist tomorrow night.
I mean, they're on SWAC together.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're making a presentation on that.
If that's something you would feel comfortable bringing up, just expressing the need that, that there is a recreation need to sort of take the pressure off the terminus of the road for passive recreation. That might be, it might be a nice thing to bring up. The other thing that I've thought too is, that's sort of been discussed among various people is, it could be something as simple too as like a native plant demonstration area as well. Just so people can see where a riparian buffer demonstration area, someplace, some environmental education opportunity, or, some community trail that's, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what she thinks. But I know Liz didn't seem to have, Liz wasn't really optimistic about the prospects. Liz Palmer. So anyway, so that's my update on that. I think I copied you all. I don't know how many of you were copied on Ann's email about the light pollution coming from the north of the county. And I responded with two journal articles. So I'm moving on, agenda item, I'm moving on to light pollution because I know that's been a recurring policy issue for us. Anyway, that was, there was an email, I responded as a citizen, but I put two really interesting links that you should look at. There's two articles in one in the journal Nature, and the other one in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. Both really preeminent journals, and both talking about the serious threat posed by light pollution. And the second one pretty much calling straight up for light to be treated as a pollutant, just like we do for anything else, like as an actual pollutant. So really worth reading if you haven't already. I still don't know, I know some of you have been more involved than I have in that discussion about what specific recommendations could be made to improve the policy. Kim, have you heard anything about that, or like where the actual policy decision is?
I don't think that there's any plan at this time for it to be updated. I had asked about it a few months ago when it had been brought up. I think when we were talking about the Natural Heritage Committee work plan, and it was updated. I have it in. I can look up when it was last updated, but there's no plan at this time for it to be updated that I'm aware of.
There is a
Well-
group of citizens, light experts and such, who has done a lot of work on the needs that need to happen. So there would be an opportunity to, I've seen presentations by a couple of these guys. If we're interested in that, we could certainly invite them to join us on another round, kind of hear their thoughts, because there's a lot of expert information available on this, and specifically on the policy. I think some of them were involved in the original draft. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge there.
Well, Kate, before you joined the committee, we had them present to us.
Okay.
Maybe a year ago. And for a while, like Phil, what is his name? Phil Iona?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it. Yeah. He came to a couple of our meetings, and but at the time that wasn't where we were focusing, so they stopped. But I'm sure Christine will remember that, and Lonnie as well, that we could reactivate that. And we in our Google Docs, we have information from them and what they thought we might want to do.
I probably heard about the same level of information you did. I would assume we had a big roundtable over lunch. So I bet we all got about the same input there. If it's something of interest, it's definitely worthwhile. If we were to, what I took away from that meeting is that group really could use someone to aggregate and to really kind of push something forward. They have a lot of technical knowledge and useful detail, but maybe not the, I think, connective tissue to help it get to the next place. So we might be able to usher that along if we were interested.
So I have a suggestion about that. I haven't been by there recently, but I assume I can't imagine anything has changed. I know that Crozet Elementary School is a horrible light pollution source, or was. I kind of wonder if maybe we should do because I really think to make this move forward, we need to take this out of the conceptual phase and into the policy phase. So I think maybe we could propose to meet some of them over at Crozet Elementary or one of these other areas that we know is a light pollution problem. Maybe and have them suggest one of the areas they think is a light pollution problem. Arrive there with the policy in our hand and talk about this site. Like, how could this site have been done better? Like, is this site in compliance with the ordinance as written? How would we know? How could we do this better? I mean, I think somehow we need to get this more tangible because.
I had tried that about a year ago. We had talked, if you remember, we had talked about it being the Charlottesville High School, tried to get the science teacher involved because there was lots of ways that we felt it could be useful. The students measuring, learning to measure light, all of these kinds of things from lots of different ways that it could be a wonderful educational experience, but that didn't go anywhere. As I researched it at the time, I discovered that there is a lot of information on specifically on lighting schools because some people feel they should be very well lit and others say just the opposite, that it's safer actually to not have them lit so that if somebody is using a light, it would show. And so there is a lot of information out there about how to light schools. And I think we would want to review that first to even see what kind of policies we would encourage them toward. Yeah, and so it didn't go anywhere. I would hope you would be luckier with Crozet. I was not lucky with the high school.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not thinking in terms of specifically, I mean, that sounds like more of an educational avenue. I mean, I was specifically thinking about the technical specifications of the light. Is this light, you know, could this light have been directed more downward facing? Is there, you know, is the lumens, you know, like, you know, are there ways that the ordinance is written that could be tweaked to make this not as bad? And then there's a question of just should they not be on after a certain hour? I mean, that's the other thing I think that gets into sort of what you're saying is like, maybe they just shouldn't be on after a certain hour, which is another aspect.
There are many
to that.
facets to it. Also, the LED concept isn't included at all. And that was a very big part of the discussion we had, is that has changed lighting completely, is LEDs. So the ability to be that much brighter with, you know, very little accounting. I would love to be involved in this if you all are interested. We could do, you know, we could kind of figure out what options exist and then gather some more information.
Well, it would be nice to, I mean, if schools are too politically hot potato, whatever, then, I mean, I think we just need to find one problematic site, like one site that we can say that this, we think this is a problem. And let's say, how could this policy have been tweaked better to address this site?
Yeah.
And if we can't find a site that we think is a problem, then by definition, there's not a problem.
One issue with the current piece is that it doesn't apparently cover residential at all.
Really?
That's what I just recently learned. And just from my house in the dark, you know, we darken our property after everybody goes to bed. Looking across our lake this time of year when we have no tree cover, the neighbors who bought that property over there light it up like the sunshine. It is just, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's appalling. Juxtaposed with that concept of I learned a lot about burying beetles when we found them actually here on site, because they are endangered. They're absolutely fascinating. They are incredibly susceptible to light pollution. So that's one of the things that has endangered that species, which kind of set me off on this a couple of years ago, is learning more about that. So that residential piece is something that I think would be important to figure out how that fits in.
Well, that's obviously a big gap in the ordinance. We've had a new home built across from us recently, and there's been a couple nights. I mean, it's not pervasive right now, but we've had a couple nights where they've had like floodlights on flooding the backyard, and we're like, wow, I hope that's not going to be a trend. But I think that is definitely something. If that's not currently covered by the ordinance, maybe that's an easy, low-hanging fruit to address.
There's definitely lots of pieces that could be looked at, and some learning to do.
Okay, so what are our action items for this? What are we going to do about this?
Kim, were you saying something? Did I talk over you?
I was just going to say, would it make sense for this group to maybe go through the ordinance and sort of track wherever there are issues that seem to need to be addressed based on what these experts are saying? I haven't personally read the ordinance myself yet. But I think it might be valuable to have a demonstration site, but it would also be valuable to just go through the document itself and identify where the issues are, where, you know, changes might need to be made.
I think that's a great idea. And in fact, it would be nice to hear from one of the staff that enforces the ordinance, to hear the kind of issues that they've had when they've gone out and gotten a complaint and tried to enforce it.
I can look into that. I don't know how that works, but this is sort of a different topic, but more on the education side. I was just thinking about Christine's tip of the month idea, if this is one of the things on her list, but if it's not, you know, if there's a need for more education, that might be just an easy, simple thing to do. Someone could do.
Yeah, I mean, I think education is always something we should be doing. So if we can put together some educational materials about it, but I think it definitely rises to the policy level because there's definitely people that know better and do it anyway. And so I'm not sure. I think education will help, but I don't think it's going to cut it. I do have to let
in addition to, I went in addition to reviewing the policy. I also found the message from the planner that I contacted in May about the lighting ordinance. And she said, well, there's a summary of the lighting updates since 2003, but some minor changes were made. Summary of the lighting updates in 2003. Some minor changes were made to the lighting ordinance since then to address some LED issues, but that's all that's been done since that time. So it hasn't been updated for a long time.
Okay. Good to know. Okay, well, that sounds like a pretty good action item. And the next good step is maybe we can get someone to the Natural Heritage, the main meeting, to talk us through the policy and see, just so that we have a better understanding of what exactly the policy says. I'd also sort of encourage all of us to go and read those 2 articles that hopefully you're copied on. I know they're in scientific journals, so they're going to be a little bit techno speak, but do an eye out for things like lumens and so forth, because those are things we might be able to use to craft a sensible policy. Because if it says lumens above X create this problem, then that's certainly something we need to think about. I can't remember off the top of my head if they mention anything like that. I'm just throwing that out there. If you have trouble accessing one of those articles, I can access them through UVA, and I can probably print a copy and bring it to the next meeting. Just let me know.
And I have some resources I can share. Some of them I think are newer things that Phil and some others had put together on the education front, which also might help prior to that discussion. So I'll send an email out.
Okay, good. My next thing is I want to mention, so we're definitely gonna have to wrap up for 6. There is a Ravenna TMDL meeting. Are you all familiar with that word TMDL?
Mhm.
Okay, so I won't go into what that means. So I'm going to be participating in that. I think that's a very important discussion. From my perspective, one of the things that I've seen that goes wrong in many TMDLs is that the practices that they approve often don't, the most effective practices that could be used are often not approved as part of the TMDL. So usually after they usually come up with, there's usually funding allocated. They usually find grant funding for these things. And then we'll go out and we'll pay for implementation. Like we'll have help people repair septic systems, for example, or fence cattle out of streams. And in the hardware, it was a huge struggle. From the beginning, I'd said, well, the problem in the hardware is not filling septic systems or cows. I mean, there's some issues with that, but that's not the big issue. It's these multi-million-dollar homes with no buffers at all in these massive yards. And there was no, there's no residential, BMP that was part of that program. So a lot of like the things that we do through the Albemarle conservation decisions or the Virginia conservation assistance, we wouldn't be able to do those there. Things like converting turf grass to native plants or just planting trees, those were not approved as part of the things we could have done in the hardware. So even though we had funding, it was really, really hard to spend that money. It was like pulling teeth to get people to take money to do anything in the hardware. Whereas over in Nelson County, they really did have some massive septic issues, and man, that we're on our 2nd round of funding over in Nelson County for addressing some of their septic issue problems that have contributed to TMDLs in Nelson. So just bring that back around to the Ravenna TMDL. I'm going to participate in that process. what I really want to advocate for is, making sure that, the kind of practices that are approved are things that would really benefit the health of the Rivanna, and also value added practices that benefit biodiversity as well. Because if we can get some lawns converted to native plants, that not only helps water quality, but also, helps increase biodiversity as well. So, Kim, do you have any updates on water quality initiatives from the county and where those are at?
So I gave a, well, it was on the consent agenda, but there was a little discussion about it today about the Stream Health Initiative project earlier today. So you all can access the recording or the PDF actually, which is just a summary of the public engagement plan and timeline for the Stream Health Initiative project for the rural areas. So I encourage you to watch that, or there wasn't much discussion, so maybe just accessing the PDF would give you all the information you need. So yeah, so that's coming, and you're all welcome to participate.
So have they chosen the members of that yet, or is that still at the beginning stages? I mean, who's going to be on the advisory?
So there will be a stakeholder work group, and no, we haven't chosen that yet. There's a stakeholder list from the first round of engagement from 2017, and certainly we'll be re-engaging a lot of those stakeholders, but there's also an effort to just broaden it out, to engage different groups and communities that were not involved the first time around. So hopefully it will be more diverse and more of an iterative process where there's feedback and, work going on, and then, continuing to work with the community throughout the process. But yeah, there will be a stakeholder group, a work group. And I think it's, there's likely going to be an opportunity for folks to volunteer for that. And then we will also, try to select folks with certain areas of expertise.
Great. Well, if we should definitely see if we can encourage, maybe get some representation from the Natural Heritage Committee on there. If we can find someone on the committee that would be willing to serve. I mean, that was kind of a hole the last time, is I don't think we had any representation in that process.
Mm-hmm.
When will people be chosen? Do you have a timeline on that?
So we are really just going to be putting out some just preliminary information in January through March is sort of what their communications folks call like the discovery phase. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for public input and public input site, and some just sort of initial finding out who wants to participate and, who are we reaching. And then at that point, there'll be, opportunities to let us know that you want to be engaged and that you're willing to, really fully participate. Because I think to be part of the stakeholder work group, you're really going to have to commit to being engaged and participating. And, obviously things come up, but to the best of your ability. So that will likely, to answer your question, Nancy, happen in, January, February.
Okay.
Okay, I have one last item I'd like to talk to you about, parcelization, which is part of our, things we want to address through the Biodiversity Action Plan. But before I get to that, I have some housekeeping to do. Have we designated someone to take minutes for this committee meeting? The subcommittee? Is someone willing to volunteer to be secretary?
I am recording these and I do post them on YouTube after the meeting, if that helps.
So Kim, does that qualify as, I mean, that doesn't really qualify as minutes, does it, for legally, or does our report back to the main committee, is that sufficient, or What do
My
we-
understanding is that, if there could just be a quick written summary report back, I don't think it needs to be a very detailed minutes, that can suffice.
Okay. So is there a volunteer for that?
I take notes just to keep my brain on. So if we're really okay with minimalist, I could probably pull together something that gets the requirement checked off.
That's good. Yeah, minimalist. I'm thinking, I think it could be a paragraph,
Yeah, I mean, it might end up a bullet list,
something very
just to
short.
kind of hit the top ends.
A bullet list.
Well, this is always a chore that no one likes. And it seems a way we could do it is rotate it. Kate has volunteered for the next time. Lonnie, you want to do it, then I would do it. And maybe if we just did it that way, it would certainly be sure that we all stay engaged. And it divides it up, so it's not just the chore that one person has to do.
I mean, I've probably got enough here to send you all something to look over and just kind of see if it's acceptable. My format may not be what you're looking for, but at least then it's a recollection of the topics that we touched for
That's
this
fine.
for this one. I've certainly got that.
Yeah, and I think
Whatever you want to do.
And I think I sent an email about the previous one. I have the previous one. I neglected to bring that to this meeting, but I'll also distribute what I think the minutes of the first meeting were, so that
Okay.
we can't approve that now because I don't have it in front of me. I didn't think to do that, but I'll have that for the next meeting. But I'll send that out in advance. So
Okay.
you guys have those minutes as well.
So in the next day or so, I'll put this together, and can I just email it to all four of us and we'll just look over it and see if it's okay, and then we can approve it later.
Yes,
Okay, perfect. So I've got today.
great.
Christine did mention at the last, or maybe it was an email, I can't remember. I remember reading, or maybe it was Nancy, was it at the last meeting? Asking if we had put together a charter and goals for this group, which I don't know what requirement exists for that. If it's something that's, I'm just throwing it out there because she suggested it was something we should do.
Well, it wasn't, yes, that's correct. I don't think it was a charter, but I did think it was more something like a mission statement as
Sure.
to
Sure.
of what we wanted to do, because, it could be so varied. So some kind of a mission statement was what she thought would be helpful. Based on what the Education Committee did, but I don't remember the wording that she did, but it was like a sentence or two.
Have we
Okay.
seen that? I don't recall. Did she share that? Because if she shared that, we could very easily be like, boop, boop, just kind of fix, swap. Did you see that, Nancy, or no?
I think she did share it, but
Okay,
as I said, I don't remember the wording at this
Yeah,
time.
she shared it. It's also on the Google Drive in the education
Okay.
folder. So
Yeah,
I think it is called the Charter and Goals. You're right, Nancy. It's not really fully a charter, but it's just a couple sentences and then has some bullets about what the goals of the subcommittee are. So
okay.
I don't think it needs to be really elaborate.
so maybe it's something we can all just look at over the next month and then work on it, then put it on the agenda for the next time.
But yeah, I'll volunteer to draft something for that.
Okay,
Great.
Just, yeah, I'll volunteer to draft something. I'll let you know.
That way
it'll be
we're at
something
least being
simple.
responsible or responsive.
So one of the things I wanted to bring up, something that's sort of been percolating in my head for a long time, is the pesky issue of parcelization. If you guys remember back to the biodiversity action plan, there's that nice picture of Chalk Mountain that has like the barcodes. I mean, like the narrow parcels that sort of like run like what I call barcodes along along Chalk Mountain, like crazy weird parcels. They're drawn, to be very, very thin and very long, like little sticks. The term parcelization I got, I think it was originally from Scott Clark. The difference was parcelization is what happens before fragmentation, basically before, you have a large landscape, and then there may be contiguous habitat. The Southern Albemarle Mountains are a good example of that. But then once that gets subdivided into small pieces, it's only a matter of time before those parcels end up creating fragmentation as the land uses differ between those different parcels. Plus, land management of that land becomes very difficult because any kind of management activity you might want to do, like be it controlled burn, or even recreational opportunities like having a hunt club or someone to manage deer populations, that becomes impossible to do when you have a property that's only like a couple 100 feet wide. Like you can't track a deer. It's going to go through multiple, you hit a deer and it's going to go through multiple properties. You can't have hunting on a property like that. So it creates a lot of, and never mind if you wanted to do something like controlled burns or habitat restoration or even invasive species management, it just becomes a nightmare in terms of like, we have all these different parcels that are all subdivided up. Long time ago, the county looked at they had a series of ordinances that they tried to pass that were part of the mountaintop protection ordinance. They included stream protections, critical slope protections, and then also phasing and clustering. And I think because they tried to do so much at one time, a bunch of these didn't pass. And clustering was one of those things that would have been a real asset to solving this kind of problem, but it didn't pass when that came forward. At that time, there was there wasn't a majority of conservation-minded people on the board of supervisors, maybe a tactful way of saying it. And so that proposal lost. But I think it's time to revisit some of those ideas and think about ways we could change some of our policies in terms of subdivision in the rural area to try and fix this. You guys probably remember some things presentations Scott Clark did about how subdivision works in the rural area. Essentially, you have a certain number of by right, a certain number of division rights that were handed out when they created the rural area based upon parcel size and so forth. And these development rights get passed along from property to property as subdivision occurs. But then there's also, you can also make as many 21 acre, is it 21 acre? I think it's 21 acre subdivisions as you like. So if you have like but the problem with this is that if you look at some of these properties like subdivision, like Blandamar is my favorite, poster child to pick on. You just end up with these 21 acre McMansion subdivision developments where people, I think one quote at the time, someone said, oh, when they developed this policy, they said, oh, well, no one's going to have a 21 acre yard. This is fine, but they'll just be farms, right? There's no way someone would have a 21 acre yard. And yet, you know what people did? They had 21 acre yards. So that's a big problem. I think one solution to this problem that's been percolating in my head is that I think, well, there's two things I think that we're talking about. One is coming up with more uniformity in terms of how parcels are created. There is an item in the action plan that talks about maybe the ratio of length to width shouldn't be crazy out of proportion. So like maybe your parcel shouldn't be like 10 times longer than it is wide. these crazy long strip parcels, maybe that just shouldn't be a thing. I don't know exactly what the proportion should be. That would be the recommendation, but that would be one way of at least addressing these long strip-like parcels, the barcodes. The other thing is that I wonder too, if we kept, I did engage Scott Clark, and I think there is another way we could address this too. We could keep the process for determining the number of division rights a property has the same as we have it now, but then make the subdivision size 5 acres or less, so that when people subdivide off a piece of property, the biggest that piece can be is 5 acres. If you did that, then if you had a property that was several hundred acres, you would end up, it wouldn't be exactly a cluster, but you still end up with one big parcel left over that's very large. And then you'd only have little tiny parcels that were created out of that big. So it would definitely reduce fragmentation if we had a policy like that on the books. So that was a lot. And we only have sort of like 15 minutes-ish to talk about it. But I wanted to throw that out there to sort of get people thinking, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I've been quite interested in that. I hadn't thought about it as much through the lens of property as much as roads. But it's exactly the same concept. Just looking to reduce the small pieces. But yes, no.
Well, the road issue is a very interesting one to me too. One thing that perplexes me is, and this may be another way of going about reducing fragmentation. On the Board of Supervisors, a consent agenda, you'll often see adoption of new roads. Like people who had like private roads, and then it's never a matter of discussion really that the Board of Supervisors just automatically accepts these roads. And so the development community has gotten into this sort of like mindset. Well, it doesn't matter how many roads we build, the county will just pay for them and take them over and, and adopt them. But what if that wasn't true? Like, what if it wasn't on the consent agenda? And we say, this is the rural area. If you build it, you need to maintain it and take care of it forever. Maybe that would send a different message about, building roads in the rural area.
Or if simply there was a process that required some manner of not just discussion, but feasibility and assessment of different factors. There's one piece left, a connectivity piece to the Berkmar Extended that's going to cut through a whole bunch of tracks of, and my first thought there was, wow, that's a great thing to do to the wildlife. It's completely unnecessary. So a process that would have surrounded that decision-making item might have brought those things to light. So yeah, totally in agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whole concept of roads, the other thing is too, I've long believed, gravel roads are another big pet peeve of mine. That's also in the action plan. I think we create a lot of fragmentation when we pave those roads and in the rural areas. I think it's really, I would love to see those go through the planning commission before they get approved, and be treated as a planning issue. It's when the Board of Supervisors actually approves those roads to be paved, it's interesting to look at the language of it, because it actually says, whereas we know of no pending development that would increase traffic on this road. And yet I've never known of anyone doing an analysis to determine if that's true. And it seems if you're going to have that kind of statement that you're signing, yes, we believe this is true. It's almost like, well, we know it's true because we never asked.
Right. Due diligence might help in there.
I mean, I would love to see that go through the planning commission, to have the planning commission be instructed to be like, what is the implication of paving this road? How many development rights are still in this area? What would be the impact on fragmentation, on the community? Because the next thing that happens after a road gets paved is developers start building subdivisions, because no one wants to put a subdivision on a gravel road. So there are, it's a de facto upzoning when these roads get paved. So,
I have a lot of thoughts on this, not so much as much specifically to roads, but so I've worked on land conservation projects for a number of years, and one thing that this committee could consider is supporting the land conservation programs, or encouraging more support of the land conservation programs, especially since, you know, the ACE program is not at all funded right now. And potentially other ways that those programs could be applied. Not to detract from the things that you're suggesting, Lonnie, because I think there might be opportunities for that as well. But I mean, in addition to that, and then the other thing that is in the biodiversity action plan that could be explored, I think, is as a transfer of development rights program, a TDR program. And so these are, we only have a few minutes left, so these are kind of topics to table for later, but just to think about those things. And there was one more thing I was going to mention, might have lost it, but
yeah, so I'm glad you brought up transfer.
oh, I know what it was. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
To cut you off. It was just that it came up in discussion before in a previous meeting that we had about the comprehensive planning effort that's coming up, and having different types of zoning, like a conservation zoning.
Yes.
And that is something that where, you know, these ideas may actually be able to be put into implementation. So just to try to maybe to consider those things and focusing, you know, future discussions.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. For example, if you had the minimum, like for example, the idea of having a minimum parcel size, no, maximum parcel size, not minimum, maximum parcel size of 5 acres. If you combine that said, we're going to create the overlay of conservation, we're going to create a conservation zoning in the area, you know, maybe targeting the areas of highest you know, that we've already identified in the biodiversity action plan, or some other metric, and applied that. And you could say in this district, the maximum subdivision is 5 acres. I mean, I
Right.
think, once again, also like with transfer development rights, one thing I've thought for a long time is that if you take all the special sites that we've identified, you know, the acreage is a percentage of the county is very small. It's not a huge percentage of the acreage in the county of our special sites. I would say a reasonable TDR program might be allowing anyone that has one of the has an area designated by our committee as a special site, or within sort of overlay that we create, to be authorized for transfer of development rights, to sell those by right to someone else. And that anyone that purchases those could develop those by right anywhere they like in the county. Because there's so few of those development rights that could be easily absorbed elsewhere in the county.
Right. Yeah, that's the issue, is the receiving areas, but I think it's not insurmountable. You know, it's done in other places. So there could be support for that if it's thought through carefully, I think.
I think the big area where TDR fails is that it's a supply demand issue. So you want to keep supply low and demand high, because if you create too much supply, no one will ever purchase it. Or if you don't create enough, like if there's not enough demand, you don't create a big enough receiving area, that's another problem. So you want to create a place where people really have an incentive to purchase these things. If all they get at the end of the day is the same thing, same benefit they get from a conservation easement, they'll just get a conservation easement. So it doesn't provide any other additional benefit. The growth area is another area of another possibility, because we don't have conservation areas and we don't have conservation easements in the growth area by definition. So areas that are targeted as green space, like the county has designated areas that they would like for recreation and green space, like along the Ravenna River, for example. That's another opportunity I see for TDR, because you could, you know, you might have a developer, be it, Charlie Hurt, Wendell Wood sort of guy who owns many different parcels in the growth area. And you just said, you know what? You can transfer some of these development rights out of here. If you have one of these areas that's designated as green space, we'll allow those to be severed and transferred to another parcel, even one of your own. That would be a big thing. Just even the ability to take, if you own two parcels that are joining each other, the ability to take the development rights from one and move them to the other parcel, there's an environmental benefit. That would be a big improvement. So yeah, there's a lot to be discussed among those ideas. So, I mean, we could start thinking about maybe going through those different ideas one by one. Maybe I'll put together sort of a bulleted list of some of the ideas, and feel free to add to them about ways we can address this issue of fragmentation and parcelization. And maybe start thinking about how we can start to craft some policies for adoption around these concepts. Using, of course, the Biodiversity Action Plan as our guide. So if you haven't gone back and read that section, please do. Okay, that's all I have. Does anyone else have anything else?
Well, I think this was great, Alani. I mean, I think this was a lot. There's a lot here to work on.
This was a jam-packed, very fun time. It was great. I really struggle in the 2-hour meetings. I think honestly, one jam-packed hour is so much better for my mental health. So,
well, let's
perfect
make sure,
for me. Thank you.
Yeah, let's make sure that we can be strict about keeping this to 1 hour in the future, maybe, because I mean, really, do we need more than that?
Yeah.
We just went boom, 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 and we covered a lot of cool stuff, and I'm excited to follow up on these things. And I'll get some notes out to you guys. It'll probably take me until the end of the day tomorrow, but this will be quick and I'll ship them out and we can all kind of figure out where to go with all these pieces.
Okay, that's awesome. I appreciate it.
So thanks, Lonnie. This was great.
Okay, I need to hop into my next meeting now. So
Okay. See you all soon.
You bet. I hope in person.
Thank you,
That
Carolyn.
would be great.
Thanks, Carolyn.
You're
Thanks.
welcome. Bye, y'all.